introduce you. Phillip Collins, this is our crowd. Okay. I'm not a very good introducer.
Oh, that's fine.
Very brief.
I wanted to thank everybody for the chance to come down. I wanted to thank the Niobrara County Library for providing me with a venue, and I wanted to thank my beautiful wife, Brandie Joy Collins, for her love and support, and first and foremost, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So what I'm going to present for you tonight is kind of a crude synopsis of the thesis of the book I co-authored with my brother Paul Collins, entitled The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. What I'm going to be presenting is just going to be a very condensed distillation, but I hope that it would be comprehensive enough for you. Let's start off with defining our terms. The term scientific dictatorship was first coined by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World Revisited. And for the edification of those in attendance, I will read Huxley's statement concerning scientific dictatorship verbatim. He wrote, quote, "The older dictators fell because they could never supply their subjects with enough bread, enough circuses, enough miracles, and mysteries. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work, with the result that most men and women will grow to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. There seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown," unquote. Now, essentially, what Huxley is describing in this excerpt is really a theocratic order where scientists and technicians qualify as the ruling priesthood, because science has supposedly allowed them to replicate the miraculous. This coterie of so-called experts has been imbued with a sense of quasi-divinity, which in turn legitimizes their hegemony. And in our book, we describe such a societal model as an epistemological cartel. The word science is derived from the Latin word scientia, which means knowing or knowledge. And thus we can derive from this etymology the fact that there is an epistemological dimension to science. After all, epistemology is etymologically derived from the Greek word episteme, which also means knowledge or knowing. And an epistemological cartel, in the words of system architect and analyst Daniel Posner, wields, quote, "ostensible control over the knowable," unquote. Where the rulers of l'Ancien regime, the old order, relied upon the so-called mandate from heaven to legitimize their hegemony, a scientific dictatorship relies upon its supposed epistemological primacy to legitimize its hegemony. As we shall see, this rationale is no less mystical in character than the so-called mandate from heaven that preceded it. The ascendancy of the scientific dictatorship presents the contention that the various incarnations of 20th century totalitarianism are all derivative of the aforementioned societal model, and that a global form of this model has been gradually imposed upon the world by competing elitist enclaves. The term scientific dictatorship can be used interchangeably with the term technocracy. And in classic political terms, technocracy denotes a system of governance where policy professionals rule by virtue of their specialized scientific and technical knowledge. Now, one of the earliest theoreticians to systematize technocratic thought was Sir Francis Bacon, who wrote the New Atlantis, which was published in 1627. And the New Atlantis presented the mandate for the formation of what he called an invisible college. Now, such a mandate also circulated within certain occult secret societies, particularly the Rosicrucians. And Bacon himself was a member of the Secret Order of the Helmet, and some allege a Grand Master of the secret Rosicrucian order. The various points of departure notwithstanding, these esoteric orders espouse a soteriological view of knowledge. And according to this view, the cognitive powers of man constituted a salvational force that will eventually banish all social ills and even shatter the fetters of human finitude. For example, the limitations of time, space, mortality, etc. This frustration with human finitude was symptomatic of the influence of Gnosticism, which, according to author Philip Lee, viewed the physical universe, quote, through despairing eyes, saw matter in terms of decay, place in terms of limitation, time,
in terms of death, unquote. Given the inherent obstructions of this ontological plane of existence, the Gnostic concluded that, quote, the material world itself is the result of a cosmic faux pas, a temporary disorder within the pleroma, unquote. And in hopes of transcending the frustration of human finitude, the Gnostic valued what they called gnosis, which is basically Greek for knowledge. So once again, we see this soteriological view of the cognitive powers of man, of knowledge. The concept of gnosis denoted direct knowledge of the divine, achieved through personal initiation, the study of nature, and revelation through some divine agency. The soteriological view of knowledge, which was espoused by the Order of the Helmet, of which Bacon was a member, and also the Rosicrucian Order, which some allege he was a Grand Master of, and other closely aligned secret societies appear to all have been derivative of the Gnostic concept of gnosis. Bacon's outlook may have been informed by this soteriological view of knowledge, as is evidenced by the famous Baconian dictum, quote, knowledge itself is power, unquote. According to the professor of religious studies, Karl Raschke, this aphorism, quote, suits quite precisely the magico-religious mentality of Gnosticism, unquote. Its various incarnations and ideological pedigrees aside, the very fabric of the crusade to establish a scientific dictatorship is pervaded by the spirit of Gnosticism. St. John refers to Gnosticism as, quote, the spirit of Antichrist, unquote, in the 4th chapter of his first epistle. And it must be understood that in those particular passages, John is not referring to the eschatological Antichrist of prophecy, so we're not going to be taking a detour into, such Christian prophetic speculations like those of Tim LaHaye. But instead, he was referring to the zeitgeist, or the spirit of the age. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 3, he writes that the antichristic spirit, quote, was coming and is now already in the world, unquote. And the Greek verb come, as it is invoked here, is written in the perfect tense. In the original Greek, the perfect tense version of come denotes a past occurrence that is gradually unfolding in the present and the future. And such is the case with Gnosticism, which pervaded the formative ethos in which Bacon's ideas were formulated. Gnosticism's presence in modernity is evidenced by the fact that the modern purveyors of technocratic governance are informed by the very same Baconian ideas. Thus, we do not have really what we would call conspiracy in the traditional sense, but a continuity of thought. And that continuity of thought qualifies as anti-Christic because it opposes Christianity's theocentric soteriology, a God-centered salvation, with an anthropocentric soteriology, or man-centered salvation. In short, man affects his own salvation and transfiguration into the divine through his own cognitive powers. And we will see that this continuity of thought, when we examine socio-political utopian movements, particularly those of communism and fascism later. But one of the core normative contentions of Bacon's The New Atlantis was that the philosopher kings of Plato's Republic were to be replaced by a technical elite, and scientists and technicians would circumvent conflicting political interests, giving rise to an apolitical bureaucracy. And this contention that scientists would, seize the reins of governance really stems from the religion of scientism, or what is scientism? Scientism is, for all practical purposes, epistemological imperialism. It promotes the extrapolation of science into contexts that fall well outside its vocational ambit of scientific inquiry. When extended beyond its legitimate fields of application, science really becomes a rigid template to which even the most complex entities like man must conform. The scientific outlook acknowledges no moral master, gives no assent to moral or aesthetic judgments, and in the words of B.F. Skinner, it dehomunculizes man, who was a being who was originally defended by the literatures of freedom and dignity. And not surprisingly, neo-Darwinian ideologue Richard Dawkins, who believes that science should inform moral discourses, has argued that the demarcations between humans and animals are, quote, more fuzzy and less clear-cut, unquote. Of course, such a view of man presages his eventual dehumanization and subjection in a eugenically regimented society. And the path towards such dehumanization and eugenical subjection began in earnest with the popularization of Darwinism, which we discuss at length in our book. When extrapolated into the context of governance, science becomes an oppressor. In the scientifically regimented state, the citizen becomes little more than an amalgam of behavioral repertoires whose every thought, feeling, and idea is supposedly the product of external stimuli. And from a scientific standpoint, the populace's motives can be calculated and systematized, thereby allowing those few conditioners who are accountable to no moral master to develop economic and technological stimuli that can produce the desired patterns of mass behavior.